we appear to have entered into the world of hateful politics, thanks to Keir Starmer yesterday, getting up on stage at Liverpool, where it was the final closing speech of Labour Party conference, which has been riddled with doubt, riddled with all sorts of infighting, riddled with he said, she said, people stabbing each other in the back, Andy Burnham saying he wasn't interested in running for Prime Minister, then keeping saying that he thought the Prime Minister was doing it wrong, then saying there was a culture of fear, then saying that actually he gave his full backing to the Prime Minister and he wasn't going to try and take over. Yesterday afternoon, Keir Starmer did something I think an awful lot of people are quite shocked about this morning. We obviously covered it massively yesterday right here on Talk. I was listening to Jeremy Carl's show yesterday afternoon and Kevin O'Sullivan last night on the political asylum. The day Labour dragged politics into the gutter is the front page of the Daily Mail this morning. Desperate Keir Starmer accuses Nigel Farage of not liking Britain. Then David Lammy, who formerly was the Foreign Secretary, is now the Deputy Prime Minister, claims Reform leader Nigel Farage flirted with the Hitler Youth and then was forced to apologise and retract it. Nigel Farage responded, and I don't think I've ever seen him quite so angry as this, by accusing the Prime Minister of inciting the radical left, and says that Keir Starmer is no longer fit to hold office. So, ladies and gentlemen, the battle plans have been drawn. We want to hear from all of you this morning, because I'm sure that many of you will have a view on being called the enemy. Many of you will have a view on being called racist. We talked about this on Monday after Keir Starmer raised the racism issue in an interview with Laura Kunsberg, when he declared that he thought that Reform's policies on immigration were racist. He shied away from saying that Nigel Farage was racist, but clearly there's a lot of people in the Labour government who think that Nigel Farage and anyone who supports him is a racist. And I think that is entirely wrong. I think it's entirely shameful. And as Nigel Farage says, he thought that Keir Starmer was a decent man. They could have their differences of opinion, but he thought fundamentally he was a decent man who would do decent things for this country. Well, I think yesterday Keir Starmer proved exactly what he is. He is a desperate man, drowning, literally hoping to take anybody else down with him and clutching at any straw that he can find that might keep him in power for just 5 minutes longer. I think it's pretty disgraceful. I think he brings shame on the Labour Party. I think he brings shame on this country. And for him to make out that he's somehow reclaiming the British flag, I think quite frankly and quite honestly is a disgrace. 0344 499 1000. Lots of other stories to talk about this morning, of course, but this is the main effort. This is the main shot in town. Keir Starmer goes back to Downing Street today, having dragged politics into the gutter. What's he going to do next? I ask myself. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Very good morning to you. Welcome to the 1st of October. What is it they say? A pinch, a punch, the 1st of the month, and all that sort of thing. Theo Usherwood's here. Very good morning to you.
Great to be with you, Mike.
I say this without any fear or favour. The Daily Mail say, who's the nasty party now? It feels like we crossed some kind of Rubicon yesterday in the world of politics. You've covered it for a long time. I have, not in quite as much depth as you. But I don't think I've ever seen anything like a speech like that in any party political situation. No,
and I think it's a high-risk strategy that is probably going to, in fact, I know it's going to backfire.
Almost certainly.
It's if you know, Labour needs, Keir Starmer needs those voters who have left Labour from the last election to go and vote for Reform, because they're frustrated at the fact that he hasn't done what he said he would do, whether it's smash the gangs or fix the broken economy or whatever. Right. He needs them to come back to Labour. Now, if you turn around and you say that those people in your speech, by inference, are racist for supporting Reform, they're not going to like you. If you don't like the voters that you need to vote for you, they're not going to suddenly like you back.
Right.
And that's that's fundamentally the danger now for Keir Starmer, is that he's, yes, that was a speech that went down well at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. The delegates liked it. They'll give him a stay of execution. Fine. Yeah. But to the country, and particularly to those voters, those disaffected voters who have turned towards Nigel Farage and the Reform UK, to suddenly turn around and say they're racist or they don't believe in this country, when they're the ones who are suffering or finding life really difficult.
Exactly right.
To suddenly expect them to come back.
And to talk about fairness in the way that he talked about it, which was one-directional, only, not multi-directional, because fairness goes both ways. How fair is it for people to find they've been on a housing waiting list for many, many years, only to get leapfrogged over by somebody from Somalia because he's come here in the last 2 weeks on a boat. That's what I call fairness and unfairness. He doesn't address any of that. And also, it shows the paucity of ideas in places like Downing Street, where the country's ruling party thinks the best thing they can do is appeal to the people in the room i.e. at Labour Party conference, with ignoring the people outside of that, which is the majority of people in the country.
But the paucity of ideas, but also the desperation of Keir Starmer's position now politically. You know, he came into this conference having lost Angela Rayner, Lord Manderson, and two of his strategists, I should say, key people within his number 10 operation. And there was a sense of desperation that he just had to get through this conference, hold it together. I think, you know, the prevailing view is that he has done that for now, but there are far bigger obstacles coming up. You can't ignore the budget, which I think is going to be very difficult for the Chancellor and for Keir Starmer. We're already talking about, you know, the Jack Elsom's got the exclusive in The Sun. I see about Rachel Reeves going to lift the two-child benefit cap. That isn't the way.
They can't afford to do it.
They can't.
Where is the money going to come from? They're already saying this is going to lift more people out of poverty. Well, only if you give them more taxpayers' money, which they don't have to give.
And so that's going to add, you know, to lift that cap, it costs £3.5 billion a year. Is that coming on top of the £40 billion worth of tax rises?
And on top of the $5 billion that they couldn't remove from the welfare benefits claim before. Dan Hodges, again, a man who's been, has been charting Starmer's demise with great skill. He says a good speech, but Starmer is still doomed, and this is how the end will come. And he reckons that the run into Starmer's removal will be marked by a series of waypoints. First, Burnham's ally Lucy Powell will be crowned deputy leader, which I think we all expect to happen, because she's well ahead of Bridget Phillipson, who was trying to be the sort of insider job.
Well, she's the insider.
Rachel Reeves will deliver her budget, surrendering in similar fashion the final slender threads of the government's fiscal and political credibility. Soon after that, Morgan Wicks-Sweeney will be announced as stepping down as the senior aide, as chief of staff, and then the final reckoning, if it goes that far, is of course the May elections, where he'll get slaughtered. And Nigel Farage is vowing to teach him a lesson in those. And I've never seen Nigel Farage quite so angry as he was yesterday, because it was really, frankly, a disgraceful personal attack on Nigel Farage as a man.
Yes, it was, but I think also, and I saw that, you know, I've seen, you know, the quotes from Nigel Farage. I think there's something that there's an opportunity in this speech for Nigel Farage.
Oh, totally.
And what I think is that opportunity, and firstly, there were 2 points to, you know, it was quite Trumpian, his response. I mean, it was like, you know, we're talking about we're talking about Charlie Kirk.
Well, if you're going to call him Trumpian, you might...
No, I'm not saying it's an insult. I'm not saying it's an insult.
No, but hang on. But don't forget that this is exactly what Biden did. You know, Starmer made a Biden-esque speech.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, you know, calling them deplorables and all of that stuff that Hillary Clinton did. What I'm saying is that if he's borrowing from Trump, then Starmer's borrowing from Biden.
Absolutely. I'm not, sorry, Mike, just so you're clear and your listeners are clear, I'm not saying that as an insult.
No, I'm not saying that either. I don't think it is. Listen, to be called Trumpian is not an insult. I don't mean that. I just mean that, you know, he is being, like Donald Trump, in answering what is a similar accusation that the Democrats made against Trump back in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's completely correct. The other thing I think that Farage is doing, and this is, and we've heard this continually from the Reform UK leader, is to talk up Jeremy Corbyn. And what I think that will do is it will push Farage into the centre, and I think it will mean that many voters who aren't yet convinced by Nigel Farage will actually start to see him as the safe go-to option.
He's going to be the new Conservative Party, and this is what their strategy has been all along. They haven't had to say it, but it's been pretty obvious for anyone to see what they're doing. You know, many of their supporters haven't liked the fact that they brought some Tories in, some former Tories. You know, Danny Kruger's in there, you know, Nadine Dorries is in there, some Reform voters. But what he's doing by doing that is setting himself away from the likes of Advance UK and the people like Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib and Tommy Robinson and all of that. They're all over there in the extremist area, which is as far as he's concerned, and he's occupying the middle ground. So he's not just usurping the Conservative votes. He's actually becoming the new Conservative Party.
Yeah, and
that's what I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Starmer will be, and I think Starmer's speech plays into this, will be the figure on the left. And as we saw yesterday, there's pressure from Farage, but there's also huge amounts of pressure on Keir Starmer from the left, but especially around the issue of Palestine. Jeremy Corbyn, your party.
Well, look what he's done in the past month alone to make himself move even further away from the centre ground.
And we'll see that, particularly with the approach to the public finances and tax rises that are going to hit people, many of your listeners. And then I think that Farage becomes the safe go-to option, in the same way that Boris Johnson came in 2019 when everybody was squabbling about Brexit and the country was just tearing their hair out, like, when are we going to get this done? And says, don't worry, I'll sort it. And I remember going up to see some friends in Leicestershire who were nothing to do with politics, like they're just not involved, and they were big Remain voters, and I said, who are you voting for? And they said, we're voting for Boris Johnson because we just want to leave the European Union. We're done, we're fed up with this. We are the, you know, he became the safe go-to option, and I think Farage is fast becoming that. In a way that
Starmer's handing it to him on a plate. I mean, any decent sort of political strategist will say you don't call people racist, you don't attack people, even if you think they're too right-wing for the country to stomach, which I don't think obviously they are. You don't give them that gift. You don't hand them that power, because now they've got the power. But let's have a look at some of the clips for those of you who didn't see them yesterday. Here's Keir Starmer on talking about how he opposes racism.
Everyone seen. Everyone valued, wealth creation in every single community, working people in control of their public services, the mindless bureaucracy that chokes enterprise removed so we can build and keep building, clean British energy powering our homes, technology harnessed to drive us forward, our flags flying proudly as we celebrate difference and oppose racism.
When he says our flags, he makes it sound like, you know, somehow the Union Jack is a Labour flag. You know, they're all, obviously old Yvette Cooper was brought down the whole supply from her house to give to everybody in the front row to wave. I mean, it was pathetic, wasn't it? This idea that, you know, this is a party, everybody knows what they really think. We know what Emily Thornby thinks about the flag. We know what David Lammy thinks about Britain and about the empire and about reparations. We know what they really think. The fact that they're trying to make out that they're really patriotic now because they've got a flag, they fundamentally misunderstand patriotism. Patriotism is about flying a flag. It's about actually being proud to be British, right? And to try and make that into an argument about, you know, oh, reformers saying certain people aren't British. That's not the point at all.
No, and you know, it wasn't so long ago when, you know, Labour conferences under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, the British flag wasn't, you couldn't find one for love or money.
No.
I mean, they're all Palestinian flags.
Exactly.
Yeah,
or Irish flags or something, you know, absolutely ridiculous.
You know.
Here's Starmer talking about Nigel Farage specifically.
We can all see these snake oil merchants on the right, on the left, but be in no doubt conference, none of them have any interest in national renewal, because decline is good for their business. I mean, think about it. When was the last time that you heard Nigel Farage say anything positive about Britain's future? He can't. He doesn't like Britain, doesn't believe in Britain, wants you to doubt it just as much as he does.
Again, they've been working on this one probably for a while in the backdoor corridors of power. But what does he mean Nigel Farage doesn't like Britain? What sort of ridiculous statement is that?
No, and what is...
It's nonsensical. Nigel Farage has been fighting for Britain to have its independent status for decades. You know, he went to the European Parliament. He was elected several times to run the Brexit Party, you know, to get Brexit done. If it wasn't for him, we would still be in the European Union, right? How can you make an accusation like that? You might dislike Nigel Farage for a lot of reasons, but you don't say he doesn't like Britain. It's ridiculous.
And I agree with that. But he also talks about this national renewal. Like, what does that even mean? What does it mean? It's sort of a word soup.
It means nothing. Well, like everything Starmer touches, it means absolutely nothing. And here he is, like, being pictured with his wife. What's his wife doing in every picture that he's at? Wearing sunglasses, like some kind of, you know, woman walking around like his carer. You know, but you know, better make sure wherever you are, you get pictures taken with your wife. What's all that about? Come on, you can't be speechless on that one. It's too early for that. I'll show you this picture first. How about this? This is great, right? Now, you can see here Lord Ali, who's still not a million miles away from the heart of government. He's wearing the same shoes as Keir Starmer. They're wearing what look like Adidas. I'm not an expert on Adidas.
They are Adidas, yeah.
But I don't know, I mean, you know, some people will tell you exactly what model they are. They're blue with 3 white stripes. Why are they wearing the same shoes and the same basic outfit? It's a simple question. You know? What is that all about?
It can't be coincidence.
No.
He is... and
what can only be described as a very good summation of Keir Starmer's premiership. He's with a dog there, but it's not his. He's got a dog on a lead that belongs to somebody else. And that's pretty much sums up Keir Starmer. He's wearing somebody else's shoes, somebody else's trousers, somebody else's jacket, and he's got somebody else's dog. What does he stand for? Absolutely nothing. I think that's fair.
Yeah. I don't know how you end up going. A Labour Party leader ends up, or Labour Prime Minister ends up going to their party conference and ends up dog sitting. That's difficult to explain. It's difficult to explain why he's got the same trainers as the man, of course.
That's really weird, isn't it? Well, they got a job lot or something, and Lord Ali turns up the back of number 10 in an articulated lorry and goes, "Right, here we go, lads." He's like the sort of old Del boy. Right, I've got 50 pairs of Adidas.
We couldn't sell these down the market,
right?
So yeah, they're here.
All right, Wes, you want some? I've got them in red as well, if you want. Rodney, where's the red ones?
Yeah, they're not even that. They just look a bit naff, don't they?
Yeah, it's just very weird.
Because of course Lord Ali. But look, Lord Ali.
We still don't know, by the way, why Lord Ali had a pass to Downing Street.
All access
right?
pass, not
and
just
we don't.
pass.
And you wonder whether he's still got some kind of pass into Downing Street, because it's all got. I mean, you know, the media have sort of given up on investigating that.
So yeah, he's still got. Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, I think he had to give back his. He had to give back the AAA pass.
He did.
Back in. This was going back more than a year now.
But you know as well as I do that somebody could slip him another one and go, "Here's another pass."
Yeah, he could do, and of course because that pass is like to all of the political meetings. I mean, it's a hugely influential pass, but it does. I think if there's a serious point, like it's either like an extraordinary coincidence that they've got the same trainers, or there is a. You know, the man still wields influence.
Of course he does.
He's still there, isn't he?
Well, he's been there since the days of Tony Blair. Don't forget, this is a guy who flew to Syria, right, on behalf of the government to have conversations with Bashar al-Assad about what to do about, you know, bombing Syria. He also went to Baghdad during the time of the aftermath of the Iraq War to have conversations with the sitting sort of ruling party to see how they could, you know, transition into democracy. You know, this guy's been at the heart of everything that Labour have done since about 2004.
Yeah.
You know, he's not going anywhere.
No, he's still there, and he's still at the Labour Party conference where this picture was taken.
Yeah.
And of course, with Keir Starmer and Lady Starmer and the dog. I couldn't even see the dogs. Did the dog have a name, or was it just
no? Apparently, it was a passerby who kind of gave him the dog for a picture. I mean, who knows? I mean, a couple of the other papers have got how that happened. It's just all a bit odd,
a bit weird.
You know, why? You know why?
Yeah, Starmer. I think is, and this is to Dan Hodges' point. I think they're talking about the end of Starmer, but I think
they're just talking about when now.
It's when, and they've just got to find somebody, and they don't have somebody at the moment. You have to remember, of course, that Starmer can, unlike with the Conservative Party, where you have the leadership challenge, and then you have a race between whoever wants to race to be the next leader. Yeah. Starmer can stand in a race. Right. So if there's a challenge,
I wouldn't bother. I'll just advise him now, just don't bother. I mean, he's only at 29% at the moment.
Yeah,
you know.
But it might be, if they can only rally around one left-wing candidate, that actually many of his own MPs, it just turns into a complete bunfight. Yeah. And many of his own MPs decide, well, we can't have, let's say it's Andy Burnham comes back, I don't think it will be, but let's say Andy Burnham comes back, or Angela Rayner decides to have a, from the back benches decides to have a go in.
The biggest problem, though, for Starmer right now is what the effect of what he said yesterday will have on the electorate. You know, let's forget for a moment about all the internecine doings inside the Labour Party. It's the country that people want to know about this morning. That's what they care about, because let's have a look at what Nigel Farage said in response to Starmer.
Labour says these policies are racist and immoral, and by implication, Reform supporters, Reform voters, Reform sympathisers are racist too. Yes, if you think we should control our borders, you are, by the definition of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, all racists. Now, I don't normally worry about abuse being thrown at me. I've got kind of used to it over the course of the last few years. But to accuse countless millions of being racist is a very, very low blow. Why? Well, this language will incite and encourage the radical left. I'm thinking of Antifa and other organisations like that. It directly threatens the safety of our elected officials and our campaigners. And frankly, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk murder, I think this is an absolute disgrace.
And I think people yesterday were reacting to that in a way which is the same way that I was reacting to it, which is that he's absolutely right. You know, what sort of maniac will put, you know, those kinds of targets on people and claim that they're racist? Because there are enough nutters in the world who might be urged to do something. You know, whether it's throwing a milkshake, whether it's throwing a brick, whether it's throwing something more serious, whether it's using another kind of weapon. You know, we've seen the result of driving people into those kind of places. I mean, and for the Prime Minister of this country to do that, I think is absolutely unbelievable and disgraceful.
And of course, you know about Lammy's comments that which he had to withdraw. And saying, but it's a serious point, because you know, if you go out with Farage, and I'm sure you saw at the Reform conference, it may have been a secure zone there, but when you go out,
he's surrounded by 7 people.
When I went out with him in Scunthorpe, it was literally like 10 people, and they were always, because of the security situation just out on the street, they were always trying to get him into a shop. So he was doing a tour of the high street, and he couldn't actually. When I knew Farage of old, right, you could just walk down the street and you get mobbed, it'd be this, that, and the other. That's all gone. Nobody is able to get. You can't get. Literally, they almost frisked people coming up to him, saying, "Okay, let's check you out, frisk you down, and now you can have your picture." And I think that's sad. In a way,
it was only last year. Don't forget, where that woman was done for throwing a milkshake over him.
It could have been so much worse. It was a milkshake that time.
It could have been anything. You know, she's been rewarded by being, I think, given a slot on Big Brother. You know, that's the left-wing establishment for you. This one from Michelle. It says, what I watched yesterday at the Labour shindig was incredibly concerning. A few things stood out, such as A Britain for All, The British Project, You Are Our Enemy, and Nation Renewal. Globalists out and proud. Mike, don't get me started on David Lammy. We'll come to David Lammy in a bit. But no, I think people genuinely are quite angry about what Starmer said yesterday and how he framed, you know, the political situation as if he's, you know, good and Nigel Farage is evil.
It's always been the way on the left. It's always been the way. There's always been this. You know it. There's always been this slight.
He talks about fairness, but he talks about fairness, right? Let's just list a few things. Is it fair to take away the Windsor Field allowance from pensioners? No. Is it fair to tell farmers that they can't use the same inheritance tax loophole that he used to give his family a field full of donkeys? Right? Is it fair to say to people, you're going to have to wait in line behind these migrants because they're more important than you are? Because that's what his policy says. You know, is it fair that we should be recognising a state of Palestine while Jewish people in this country are frightened to go down the road without fear of being beaten up by some scumbags, right? You know, is all of that fair? Because it doesn't seem to be to me.
No, it's not fair. It's not fair, and I think the fairness, you know, the narrative around fairness, the fairness, if you call it fairness, you know, that's been owned by Farage. That's if you wanted to put just a thread that runs through Reform's messaging, it is that. It is that message around fairness, and I think he's a Johnny-come-lately, Keir Starmer, with this speech. He's turning up with the flag. He's turning up, talking, trying to redefine what fairness is, and I don't think your listeners and I don't think the country are going to buy it. The other thing I'd noticed, and I hadn't compared it just to the ear because I hadn't actually heard what Farage said, I'd read what Farage said, is I think he's got a connection problem. And it sounds, because I listened to Keir Starmer's speech, and I could have been listening, you could have got AI to deliver that. It doesn't. Right. He doesn't have the intonation. You don't hear, when you hear it. It's kind of excruciating because I think I'm listening to a robot.
But there were parts
I'm just
of that
trying
speech. To do that.
I know the content, but I'm just talking about if you listen to Farage.
His delivery's awful.
If you listen to Farage, it feels like you're listening to somebody you know. You know that voice. You know the intonation. You know the highs. You know the lows. You know there's a connection there that he feels like he's speaking to you, and Starmer doesn't have that. And for all the voice coaching that he's had, for all the I don't think he had. It was the voice coach.
Yeah, the voice coach during COVID. When he got visited by the voice coach.
Yeah, at Christmas.
There's another breaking of the rules. One rule for him, 2-tier Keir.
But it hasn't worked because he's not. It just sounds like it's coming straight off an auto cue, and you could have got anybody to stand up and just read it out.
But when there were points during the speech where he had this kind of baying mob behind him, which sounded more like a far-right rally to me than anything else, and as somebody says here, Maggie in London, that Labour conference turned into a frenzied, angry mob spouting just venom and vile comments about Farage. Desperate? You bet they are. So this is the tolerant left. It's more like the nasty party, absolutely disgraceful and shameful. And that's the thing, you know, when you've got these sort of baying lefties cheering him on, as he says, we will fight with every breath in our body. You know, what do you think that means? Do you think that's incitement to violence? I would say so. Whipping up a crowd like that. If you did that at a rally that was run by Tommy Robinson, they'd be arresting people, right?
Yeah, they did.
They didn't arrest anybody yesterday, did they?
No.
2-tier Keir strikes again. 6:27. Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:30. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. It's the 1st of October, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wednesday. Theo Usherwood is here. We're poring over the remains of what can only be described as Keir Starmer's political career, which he finally kiboshed yesterday, in my view, as he clings on to dear life to try and hang around for another few months to see whether anything gets any better. It seems to be their strategy now. I don't think it will do. Let's get a voice note from Tony.
Morning, Mike. It's Tony from Nottingham. Yeah, I think it's even more sinister than that. We've seen in America, haven't we, recently with the attempt at Trump assassinations or the death of Charlie Kirk, what this sort of language can end up leading to. It can end up painting a target on people's backs, can't it? Like Nigel Farage or other people. He's already had milkshake and stuff chucked at him. Then keep chucking these words around, could have real world consequences, and we all know the result of what could happen. I think it's sinister and dangerous, and I think it's deliberate. Thanks.
Tony, thank you very much indeed. So a lot of people think that way, and you know, it's hard to dissuade them of thinking that way. One sort of word, I suppose, of a pity should we issue to Kemi Badenoch and the Tories, because I think Keir Starmer barely mentioned them yesterday.
No.
Front page of the Express today. I think they're on a mission to try and get a 0 rating for their number of sales today. Kemi Badenoch says only the Tories can take the tough decisions. Britain needs attacks. She attacks dangerous Labour and warns Nigel Farage would blow up the economy. I can clean up the almighty mess as next Prime Minister, she says. I mean, I don't think anybody cares, do they?
No.
You know,
no,
we'll see.
I mean, they're done, and you know, we turn over to, you know, got a double-page spread on page, 4 and 5, and it's just, it's over.
Yeah.
And when you speak to Tories, and I was speaking to a couple just recently, and they're so frustrated because there were just a couple of young guys who are councillors, and they were making the point that Kemi Badenoch just wants to have this consultation about everything. We're going to have a consultation around that. We're going to get to ideas. These poor guys, they've got to go out and knock on doors, and they go, "Hi, I'm your local Conservative councillor," and they have nothing to say. And they go, "Okay," and the person turns around and goes, "I'm voting Reform."
Yeah.
And then what do they say?
The end.
The end. That's the end of the conversation. Thanks, bye.
Walk back down the path.
And they realise the only way to save, their fledgling political careers is to defect.
Yeah.
And that's what they're all doing.
And that's what they're going to do. Yeah. Let's have a look at what Shabana Mahmood had to say yesterday about Nigel Farage.
Do you think Nigel Farage is racist?
I think that Nigel Farage is actually almost worse than that. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I think he's being extremely cynical. He knows that with some of the policies he's put forward, which are on indefinite leave to remain, for example, immoral and, in my view, extreme, he is sending that dog whistle to every racist in the land, but he wants to retain some respectability for himself whilst he does it, and that's what we're challenging.
Do you think he is racist himself?
Look, it's for Nigel Farage to explain who and what he is. I'm saying I can see that behaviour. No, I can see. No, I can see the behaviour that he's indulging in, and I'm calling it out.
So I thought he was
well, she's
racist.
not calling it out, is she? Because she's not saying whether she thinks he's a racist. She says he's worse than a racist. So what does that mean? Like a murderer? A rapist? What does she mean by that?
I don't.
And then she claims that she's sending out a message to all the racists in the land. How many racists does she think there are in the land? These people are off the scale.
I don't
They're
get that.
so dangerous, these people. They literally live in a world of their own. There's some funny clips which we're going to show later on when the speech is being made, and you can see them all, all the kind of the front bench are all sitting watching him, and they're all looking around like really nervously to see what people's reaction is before they do anything. There's one particular section where Rachel Reeves looks like she wants to stand up, but she's not sure if nobody else is standing. Oh, better not stand up.
Yeah.
They're really strange people. And I think they're quite weird people. And whereas Nigel Farage and Reform, and I was at the Reform conference, and I've been to political conferences before, and I said before, it was nothing like any political conference. But all the people there were sort of normal. And that's the thing that makes them different. Because you go to these things, and there's nobody normal.
No, the conferences...
They're all weirdos.
Well,
They are. They really are. I mean, you're on a borderline with them, so I know you don't want to fall out with any of them. Because you're a bit of a political anorak, right?
Okay.
But you're not enough of a weirdo to be in the Labour movement.
No, I couldn't. No, that.
But you know
fair.
what I mean.
Yeah. Look,
you know what I mean.
It is fair to say that people who attend political conferences, they are a bit
weird.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
No, use another word if you want.
Can I say odd?
Odd, yeah.
Odd. They're not necessarily the sort of people you'd.
They're not normal people, are they?
Not normal.
They're really not. They're not. They're not like the people you meet in a pub. They're not like the people you meet on the train or on a bus or just standing around, you know?
Yeah, but that is, what I would also say is that isn't just Labour. Tories can be...
Tories are the same.
They can be weird too.
I give you that.
Yeah.
All I'm saying
especially
is
when they're in packs.
All I'm saying is that at Reform, these were ordinary people, couples who had come together, people who had paid money to be members of Reform, people who just live ordinary lives, have regular jobs. They're not, you know, anoraks. They don't have their day peppered with emails from central office reading, you know, reading policy documents. They're not like that. They just want to get on with their lives. Let's go to David Lammy, though, because people may have seen this already, but here is probably one of the most ridiculous things that one of the most ridiculous people in politics has ever said.
I will leave it for the public to come to their own judgments about someone who once flirted with Hitler Youth when he was younger. That is for the public.
Once flirted with Hitler Youth when he was younger. As people pointed out, there was no such thing as Hitler Youth when he was younger, because he wasn't around when Hitler Youth was a thing. You can see what he's trying to do. Again, just trying to throw some mud, hoping that it might stick, so that somebody will go, oh yeah, but David Lammy said he was in Hitler Youth, because that's what he thinks they'll remember. But here's Lammy apologising after obviously being wrapped across the knuckles, even by his boss, Starmer.
He has denied it, and so I accept that he has denied it, and I would like to clarify that position, because in the end, the Prime Minister was keen for us to focus on the policies, not the individual.
Yeah, so he could have said I apologise, but he didn't actually say those words, did he?
Sorry, no.
Sorry, not sorry.
But if you're going to, it's the, you know, if you're going to try and land a punch,
absolute plonker.
If you're going to try and land a punch, you've got to hit the target. You can't miss. Yeah. Because if you miss, then you just ends up happening.
It just
and
looks
it's just
really,
excruciating.
it looks really stupid, doesn't it? Pathetic. And that's the trouble. I mean, these are the people.
He's Deputy Prime Minister.
These are the people who are running the country. I mean, that's the frightening bit. Yeah. You know, because you wonder if that's what they say in public. What do they say in private? What do they really think? And you know what Starmer really thinks. Starmer thinks Nigel Farage is a racist. Starmer thinks that he is God's gift to democracy and fairness and morality. What's moral about taking freebies from people? What's moral about lying about things? What's moral about being, you know, two-faced and changing your view on absolutely everything? You know, he used to be Jeremy Corbyn's mate. And then he said, oh, he was never really my friend.
But there's always been, if you understand, you know, and I've spent a long time covering the Corbyn era, the Miliband era, going back to Gordon Brown, even a bit of Tony Blair. But what you have to understand is there is this, it runs through the Labour Party like you know, blue colouring through a stick of rock. You know, this righteousness that we can do it, that we can say these things, but you can't.
Yeah, right.
We can.
Yeah, but they're horrible people.
Because we are.
They're ghastly, vicious, nasty individuals, right? Who hate anybody who doesn't agree with them. You know, I'm afraid that's the way they are, and that's what they're now. They're now showing that. You know, somebody put out a meme yesterday. The definition of racism is now anybody who doesn't agree with the Labour Party, because that's kind of what they're saying. They're like, if you don't agree with us, you're racist.
Yeah, there's probably probably fair.
Yeah, I think so. Beck says, morning, Mike. Margaret, currently in Tunisia. Please go easy on Theo this morning. Listen, Theo can take it by his own admission. He's fine. Charles from Thailand. I can't stand hearing Starmer's voice. Could you dub his voice with someone else like they used to do with Jerry Adams? Do you remember that when he wasn't allowed on the airwaves?
MI5.
Unbelievable. Alan with a voice note here.
Morning, Mike. Alan from Swansea. What an absolute disgusting man that Starmer is. What he'll do now, he'll do a massive U-turn as per usual. He'll say, I didn't read the speech before I said it, and I didn't know what I was saying. He's like a Dalek, and he got zero credibility, calling everybody racist. I'm ex-army, 10 years, mate. I'm proud of my country. I ain't got a racist bone in my body. And millions are like me and are thinking, what on earth is this character on about? And Lammy talking about Hitler Youth? Surely this is hate speech. Keep up the great show, buddy. Shut up.
Alan, thanks very much. Alan in Swansea, they're talking absolute sense. Well, indeed. I mean, talking about hate speech, like I said, I mean, that sort of rah-rah, you know, let's all stand up and fight Nigel Farage. I mean, you know, that's pretty insightful stuff. Let's have a look at what Diane Abbott said on Newsnight last night.
He's only got 5 MPs, and the danger is, I'm all for people giving him a good kicking, where Streeting did that this morning.
Yeah, interesting language. I know she doesn't mean a physical kicking, but you know, they don't. You know, the way that they would hold. If somebody said that about Starmer, can you imagine if some Reform MP had gone, if Lee Anderson had gone on and said, what we need to do is give Keir Starmer a good kicking? Yeah. Can you imagine the reaction to that? She says, I'm all for giving Nigel Farage a good kicking. I know she doesn't mean kicking him, but they would do that. They would take that, they would run with it, they would seek to get people, you know, out of office.
But we know, you know, this is something that goes back, you know, to, you know, Boris Johnson and the furore over flat.
But the public have had enough of it now. The public have had enough.
And then they go and, you know, Keir Starmer goes and claims all that money for his spectacles and his suits
and his free Taylor Swift tickets. And his wife's underwear and God knows what else he got from Lord Ali and his free pair of blue Adidas shoes so that he can look just like his idol. I mean, you know, do me a favour. It's 6:41. We've got to take a break. We're back after this. Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:43. I'm Mike Graham. Theo Usherwood is here, of course. One thing that we haven't mentioned yet is, because it has gone away a little bit, is the whole Morgan McSweeney scandal. A piece written in The National yesterday that says Labour Together, which is the organisation, the think tank that was in receipt of 740,000 quid that wasn't declared, hired private investigators to dig for dirt on Paul Holden, who's the guy that's written this new book about the McSweeney affair with you know, Keir Starmer at the heart of it and all. It's called The Fraud, and how they've sort of, you know, somehow managed to take control of the Labour movement. So lots of dirt still kind of swirling around that particular story, you know.
There's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot to come out from this. Already, there have been a couple of stories that come out from this book, and the allegation is that they basically hired private investigators to look into. To look into Paul Holden, who is the author of this book, The Fraud, which of course exposes the Morgan McSweeney funding scandal. That, I think, is a story that's going to run and run. And just to Dan Hodges' point you were mentioning earlier, it will be, you know, that's a crucial moment, the moment that McSweeney goes. Morgan McSweeney leaves Number 10. We've spoken about it before. You know, his obviously is this is his.
He'll
project.
have to go, won't he?
He'll have to go, and in the same way that when Theresa May, you know, fumbled that election so badly back in 2017 and had to get rid of her chief of staff, Fiona Hill and Nick Timothy, that was the end of the project. That's the kind of line where you go, right, finished. Right. And
you got it wrong.
You got it right. That's it. It's done. And then it's just a holding pattern. Then until, you know, at the moment, yes, you could probably argue that Keir Starmer could salvage it. I personally don't think he can. No. But once McSweeney goes, then it's just a holding pattern until they pick somebody else to take over. And I think from Farage's point of view, that's the bit when he can. I honestly believe this. I don't say this lightly, but I think Farage can go past 45 points in the polls. I think he can win an absolute landslide at the next election. Because and I'm not even talking about having to rely on the Conservatives one iota. I mean, that joke of you know, I like the journalist at the Express. You know, once a great newspaper, but like putting Kemi Badenoch on your front page saying I want to be PM
on a day like today,
just not going to happen. No, but. You know, I think when Labour will then retreat to its comfort zone, it will become incredibly left-wing. I think there'll be much more pain for people. And the
economy will be in all sorts of trouble.
The economy will go down, literally go down the pothole.
We've got the Telegraph this morning saying confidence of bosses hits a record low. Business confidence has plunged to a record low ahead of the budget as Rachel Reeves prepares a fresh wave of tax rises. If you'd watched her yesterday, you would have thought everything in the garden was rosy. You know, she talks as though the economy's fine. It isn't.
But the markets. You know, for the market, I completely agree with that. But for the markets, at least they know Rachel Reeves. At least they know there's a sensible part to it. You think somebody like Andy Burnham or Angela Rayner coming into Number 10, who they'd put in the Treasury, what could happen? And I think that will be.
And that's frightening for the city, and that's frightening for the markets.
I mean,
well, let's have a look at Wes Streeting yesterday, because he suggested exactly that. Check it out.
Who's made a real difference too? Who understands the struggle care workers face? Because she was one. She brought that experience to the cabinet table.
We'll back to that one in a minute. Morning, Mike, says Glyn from Bolton. That wasn't a dog two-tier Keith had, it was a small donkey from his field. Great show keeps me sane. And we still haven't had the answers on that, by the way, because he lied, in my view, in a sort of what you might call a sort of specifically knowledgeable, lawyerly way, when he said, I did not create a trust. He used the words very carefully to Laura Kuenssberg, I did not create a trust, because he didn't have to, because by doing what he did, the trust was already created, if you know what I mean. So it would have been wrong for him to say it was not in a trust. The fact is it was. He's just said, I didn't create a trust. And that's the problem with lawyers and reality, because he thinks he's staying on the right side of the rules, but he's coming across as a hypocrite and a liar.
Yeah, of course, because you know, we've seen what's happened. You know, this is a prime minister and his chancellor. You know, closed the loopholes that are going to affect millions of business. Well, maybe not millions, but certainly
a lot of
businesses up and down the country where there's a loophole for a specific reason to keep farming in this country, and that has a direct, just by the by, that has a direct impact on our food supply chain, which is incredible, and our independence.
And there are farmers outside conference up there, you know, campaigning for against the government's policy on their inheritance tax rules.
That loophole exists for a very important reason. And he's got a field full of
donkeys, you know.
And it doesn't exist to get around, being able to sell, being able to keep,
or to use cute, lawyerly phrases like "I didn't create a trust."
Reduce the tax liability on a piece of quite valuable land. That's what it doesn't exist for. It exists to protect businesses in this country.
Yeah. And I know enough about tax lawyers, and I speak to enough tax lawyers, and I have done in the past few days, who have told me there's no question that what Starmer did with the donkeys was a tax dodge. Absolutely no question. I think we've got the West Streeting clip now. Let's have a look.
Someone else who's made a real difference too, who understands the struggle care workers face because she was one. She brought that experience to the cabinet table as the care worker who became our country's Deputy Prime Minister. Angela Rayner, this achievement is yours. Thank you. And we want her back as well. We'll definitely make sure she sees that. We need her back.
Yeah, we need her back, he says, which tells you a lot more about the state of the party than anything, right? Because if you need Angela Rayner back with her 3 houses and her dodgy tax forms and her ridiculous trusts, because everybody seems to have a trust in the Labour government. You know, I said yesterday to Peter Kyle, he was being interviewed by Jack Elsom, I said, can you ask Peter Kyle, please, because he won't talk to me directly, if he has anything in trust? And he didn't answer the question. All he said was, I know that Keir Starmer is very good at looking after his family. That was his answer. So I'm going to ask, whenever they do come on, I don't suppose it will be very often, I'm going to ask every single cabinet minister, have you got anything in a trust? And see what they say.
That clip is... I don't think you'll get a straight answer.
Well, have they all got things in trust? I mean, are we all missing something here? Is that what they do now? They put everything in trust so they don't pay any tax?
It's hypocrisy. And it's hypocrisy. And it doesn't... The thing about... What really gets my goat just about this is, this use of trust is that is the tax dodge.
Right.
That's why they're closing the loophole to stop doing what they did.
Right.
The loophole actually exists for a really important reason. That's because you can't, when you have a large farm, you are not cash rich, or you are asset rich. And if you want to keep that farm and keep producing food that is used in this country so that we have that independence and not have to sell it off, you need to be able to not pay inheritance tax because you can't afford it, because you don't have the money in the bank.
Exactly.
Because farms operate on very small margins. And that's why the loophole exists. And yet they use the same, and it appears they all using the same, or certainly Keir Starmer has used that loophole for the particular reason they want to close it for.
And then, of course, he spent the other part of the interview saying, oh, it was only 20,000. But at the time, in 1996, 20,000 was more than the annual wage of the average salary in this country. And so he was, again, showing his complete incoherence when it comes to people's ordinary struggles and people's ordinary lives. Let's get this from Terry in Slough. Mike, I'm in my 70s, and this joke of a Prime Minister is the worst I've seen in my lifetime. And I've seen some terrible ones. I wouldn't trust this useless, incompetent Labour government to run a bath, never mind this great country of ours. And Kevin in Southampton, the masks of this commie government are truly off now. If they think waving flags will fool us, think again. They are just a shambles. And that's what people are saying. Voice note from Marco's. I think we need another break, don't we? Let's take Marco.
Mike, every sovereign nation has policies to protect its borders. To call a firm's proposals racist is just like blatant hypocrisy, because existing UK policies already treat non-citizens differently. Higher fees for foreign students, visa restrictions such as no recourse for public funds. And then there's the £1,000, I think it's more now, for the NHS levy for people who stay over 6 months. These are long-standing lawful policies. They're not racism.
Of course it's not. It's not racism at all. We'll come back. Theo, I know you've got things to say. Theo Usherwood's here. I'm Mike Graham. It's 52 minutes past 6. We are, of course, the home of common sense. Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes to 7. Well, we've nearly done a whole hour. It's October the 1st, of course. We are back right here with Morning Glory at the home of common sense. Theo Usherwood's here. Just a couple of other stories away from the Labour Party conference, because, I mean, we can get a bit bogged down in that. Don't worry, there's going to be plenty of it over the next 3 hours. Don't worry. Fat generals are going to be ousted from the Pentagon and all staff weighed twice a year under Donald Trump's new look Department of War. Pete Hegseth is, of course, the Defence Secretary. Here he is talking about clamping down on DEI.
No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. No more debris. As I've said before, and will say again, we are done with that.
That's what I call proper government, you know. No more dudes in dresses. You remember Biden had a Secretary of State for Defence who was a dude in a dress. Yeah, it was like Admiral somebody or other, and who came to work dressed as a woman.
I didn't know.
You never saw that?
No.
Oh my God!
That one
I mean, I was thinking to myself. I mean, I'm not joking. I mean, I'll find a picture.
I like the idea of weighing staff to make sure they're fit. A serious point, though.
Weighing staff.
Because you're setting, if you're a general, you're setting the example. Yeah. Right? I always remember, do you remember there was a Metropolitan Police Commissioner called Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe?
Yes, I do remember him.
And he prided himself on the fact that he was fitter than most of his police constables. Yeah. And so he would go to, if I remember this correctly, he would go down to the Hendon training base or whatever. And you have that test where you have to run beep tests. Right. Where you have to run between the beep. And if the beep goes before you got to the point, then you lose the test. And he would beat the recruits on it. Right. And he was, of course, the commissioner, and he was in his 50s, 60s. Right. I don't want to do him a disservice. But he always prided himself on the fact
which is all very well. That's all fine and dandy, but then what he should have done is then gone, now I'm not having any of you in this police force until he can beat me. That's the whole point of it, surely. You know? That's what he should have done.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't have any police officers, would we?
Well, no, I mean, there's not much point having a police officer that can't run after a burglar. How about this one? This will sum up DEI for you, and this is the Church of England, right? A woman who fled to Britain from Iran at the age of 14 is one of at least 2 female bishops shortlisted to be the new Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, I know what people will say. They'll say, well, why can't she be the Archbishop of Canterbury? Well, there will some people who will say, well, maybe she shouldn't be one because she's not a bloke. I don't really care whether the bishop is a man or a woman. But I do think the bishop of the highest church in the land, of the Church of England, should probably be somebody who didn't come here from another country.
Yes, this is Reverend Guli Francis Dakani, Bishop of Chelmsford. She arrived in this country having fled as a refugee from the Islamic Revolution in 1979, and she's amongst the shortlist. And of course, the Church